Okay, the topic I'm talking about is gun control. And my opponent's main claim was that placing more restrictions on firearms purchases and ownership will not reduce violent crime and will likely cause it to increase. And his main claims were that restrictions on firearms will not prevent criminals from obtaining them, and homeowners will be less able to defend themselves. And lastly, gun ownership by law-abiding citizens is a crime deterrent. Okay, his first claim, that restrictions will not prevent criminals from obtaining firearms, he didn't legalize something because everyone is doing it. Vandalism and shoplifting, I mean, a lot of people are doing it and no one's about to legalize it. And the purpose of the law is to protect the public, not to take the easy way out. If guns were illegal, people could go to jail for owning them, and that would benefit the public. And then he made an example to prohibition and how that was illegal and people still used it. But the difference is that the consequences were different for prohibition. Like, same thing with weed. Many people use it even though it's illegal, but not much happens to them if they get caught for it. If you're caught with illegal weapons, you go to jail. So if guns were illegal, less people would use them. Okay, and his next claim, that homeowners will be less likely to defend themselves. This may be true, but outlawing guns will still have more positive effects than negative effects. And also, homeowners can defend themselves using other weapons other than guns. They can use stun guns, pepper spray, even they have security systems installed. Alright. And his third claim is that gun ownership by law-abiding citizens is a crime deterrent. Which isn't true. The only way to stop shootings is by taking guns out of the hands of criminals. But also, not all shootings take place by criminals. On April 20th, 2011, so this year, a 6-year-old boy in Houston brought a gun to kindergarten and he injured 2 other students. It is unknown where he got the gun, but it is most likely from his parents. Now, most people have heard of the Virginia Tech shooting, where 33 people were killed. Now, the only reason these shootings take place is because of the availability of guns. If guns weren't available, people wouldn't be able to do this, bring guns to school. And then, according to Medscape.com, 65% of all domestic homicides are caused by firearms. And another point is that, compared to other countries, the United States has much more domestic homicides that are caused by guns. Now, according to the St. Petersburg Times, the U.S. has more gun deaths than any other large countries. The U.S., about 9,000 people die every year from being shot. In Canada, there's only 144 people per year. And in England, the number is 14. In Spain, 97. Now, all of these countries that have much lower numbers, they all have gun control, and guns are not available to the public. Now, one more point is that my opponent said that 20% of homicides occur in New York City, Chicago, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. All 4 cities require either a license to own a handgun or have an outright ban on firearm ownership, making them the 4 strictest cities in the country. Now, obviously gun control won't work if it's not enforced everywhere. Now, in these cities, gun control might be enforced and it's illegal to own a gun, but the city right over, they can buy a gun, or the state over. So it doesn't really make a difference if the whole country isn't uniform or doesn't have a uniform policy. So, in closing, gun control should be enforced more because it can save people's lives.
All right, the structural issues are attended to. They were fine. The signposting as you get to each point is relatively clear. I think on the first point you have the issue of legalization a little bit backwards when you're making the comparison. When you talk about prohibition, for instance, you say that the consequences are different, but the consequences that you're talking about are not the consequences of utilization of the product, but rather on the punishment. And I'm not sure that that really affects the validity of the advocate's point on that comparison. On your second point, you're trying to minimize the impact of self-defense by arguing that there are alternative methods available. I don't remember if the advocate had any measure of effectiveness. You don't have any measure of effectiveness, so at best this is moot. If you had some measure of effectiveness and could contrast it, I think that would be a stronger argument on that. On the third point, you begin with an argument that really seems to be, it presupposes the existence of your claim. The example of the kindergartner does make something of a counterclaim, and I think that works. But then you've got this sweeping generalization that all these crimes only occur because of availability of guns, and I'm not sure why that is the case, except that you've said it. And given the arguments that you have, even places that have banned guns do have crimes. They may not have as many, but they do have crimes. So that's kind of undermines the premise that you're setting up in that first point there. I did think that the social comparisons were a good idea to make, and they show that gun control can be potentially effective. So you got to be careful about the sweeping generalization that you have up earlier. The argument about the crime data on the major cities and where the crimes are occurring and that they have restrictions, you've got this assumption that it would only work if the laws are in place everywhere. That's an interesting assertion. I'm not sure there's an explanation as to why it is true, and it doesn't. I think this is where the advocate's argument about or comparison to prohibition shows that there are in fact some other problems with this. If you could, for instance, isolate places where, let's go back to the examples that you used before, where they have been able to substantially restrict access to the guns because it was a nationwide ban, then that would be something that would be a little bit more supportive of that point. All right. Merci.